Under the middle of Naples, in a tunnel nobody ever finished, there's a car park that nobody has moved since the 1970s. Saloons and motorbikes, crushed and rusting in the dark, hauled down off the streets above, while the city was still clearing its bomb rubble. The tunnel around them was cut in 1853. The aqueduct that tunnel broke into, on its way through the hill, is Greek, and it's older than Rome. 10 European cities are standing on an older one tonight. Naples is number 1. And those cars are only the top layer. Every place on this list began as something useful. Number 10, Znojmo, Czechia. Come up from the Thaya Valley into the old town, and you get a wine market, a Romanesque rotunda, and a local obsession with pickled cucumbers. Under the square, dropping through 4 floors, there are around 27 kilometres of tunnel. It started in the 14th century, and it started for the dullest reason available. Every burger house in Znojmo dug itself a cellar, because Moravian wine and Moravian grain both keep better underground. Across the 13 and 1400s, those private cellars got joined up, one wall at a time, until the town had a second town beneath it. But Moravia, in that period, was a place where armies kept turning up, and a connected cellar system is a very different object from a wine store. So the townspeople cut wells so they'd have water. They cut drainage so the tunnels wouldn't flood. They cut ventilation shafts so they could breathe down there, and fireplaces so they could cook. Some passages ran under the town walls and surfaced in open country, which meant a besieged town could still be fed. And the corridors were fitted with dead ends, choke points, and pits that a man carrying a torch would walk straight into. The clever part is the chimneys. Those cellar fireplaces were plumbed into the chimneys of the houses above, so smoke kept rising from a town that had gone underground. An attacking force would come through the gates, find every house empty, and then look up at the roofs. Smoke from nobody's fire. England has the same story in softer rock, and a great deal more of it. Number 9, Nottingham, England. Go down the Garner's Hill steps beside Nottingham Contemporary, and you walk through a doorway into sandstone. The walls are soft enough to cut with hand tools, which is the whole reason this place exists. Nottingham sits on a ridge of soft Triassic sandstone, and people have been hollowing it out for over 1,000 years. In 893, the Welsh bishop Asa wrote his life of King Alfred and recorded the town's older name, Tig Gwacobauk, the place of caves. They never really stopped. Down there you'll find pub cellars, malt kilns, dungeons, ice houses, stables, a Victorian folly with a sofa carved into the rock, and an underground skittle alley with a slot cut in the wall for your ball to come back. There's a medieval tannery too, the only underground one in Britain. Then in the 1940s, the city took roughly 1/10 of its caves, knocked them together, and turned them into air raid shelters. Nobody has finished counting. As of 2018, more than 800 caves had been recorded under the city, and around 200 of those had only been relocated after 2016, through work by the city archaeologist Scott Lomax. The Nottingham Caves survey laser-scanned 549 of them. The best-known stretch sits under Broadmarsh, the shopping centre that flattened a medieval street called Drury Hill in the 1970s to make room for itself. Broadmarsh has since closed, and demolition crews have been taking it apart. The tannery pits are still down there, cut into the sandstone floor a few metres under a dead shopping centre. Krakow's version is more recent, and it was an accident. Number 8. The Rynek Underground, Kraków, Poland. Rynek Główny is the largest medieval market square in Europe, and on a July afternoon, one of the busiest. 4 metres beneath the cobbles, there's an archaeological site of 4,000 square metres, and nothing on the surface tells you it's there. The square was due for a resurfacing. Excavation began in 2005, and what came out of the ground was an intact, working town. Archaeologists found the stone foundations of 13th and 14th century market stalls, the cobbled roads running between them, workshops, drainage channels, and old water pipes. Underneath all of that, a cemetery from the 11th century, 200 years older than the market that was built on top of it, and a layer of burnt settlement from 1241, when the Mongol raid came through and took the town apart. Then, somebody had a decent idea. Rather than lifting the finds out and carting them to a museum on the other side of the city, the plan was to leave everything where it lay and build the museum around it, underneath the square, in the hole. Work started in 2009 on a budget of 38 million zloty. It opened in 2010. So you walk on a glass floor over a medieval street while several thousand people walk over you on the cobbles without any idea. The coins are Hungarian, Bohemian, and German, which tells you what kind of square this was. There's a knife with a bone handle carved by someone who cared how it looked. From the surface, the only clue is a small glass pyramid in the corner of the square, which most people walk past on their way to buy a pretzel. Number 7. Mary King's Close, Edinburgh, Scotland. Edinburgh's is older, and the story you've heard about it is wrong. Under the city chambers on the Royal Mile, there's a 17th century street. Buildings on both sides, doorways at the height the masons set them, and soot still on the walls from fires that went out 300 years ago. It's named for Mary King, a merchant burgess who traded there in the 1600s and sat on the city council with voting rights, which was rare for a woman at the time. The close itself was ordinary, which in Edinburgh meant a steep, narrow, filthy lane with tenements towering on either side. Then the plague reached Edinburgh in 1645, and it hit this street hard. Contemporary civic records suggest the outbreak may have killed up to half the city. Here's the detail that keeps getting left out. The story everyone repeats is that the authorities bricked up the close with the sick still inside and left them to die in the dark. There's no contemporary record of anything of the kind. What the records describe is quarantine, with food and water carried in to people who were sealed off but not abandoned. It's a grimmer, slower, more ordinary horror than the legend, and it's true, which makes it the better story. The burial came later, and it was bureaucratic. In 1753, the city built the Royal Exchange on that slope. The upper stories were knocked down, the lower stories were kept as foundations. The ground level was raised over the top, and the street stopped being on the surface. People carried on living in what was left. The last resident, Andrew Chesney, was served a compulsory purchase order in 1897. The close reopened as a visitor attraction in 2003. The doorways are still where the masons left them, at a level that stopped being street level 270 years ago. Budapest's is bigger and considerably harder to explain. Number 6. The Castle Hill. Labyrinth, Budapest, Hungary. Buda's Castle Hill is limestone sitting on thermal springs, and hot water has been dissolving passages through it for a very long time. The result is roughly 10 kilometres of caves and cellars under the castle quarter, part natural, part cut by hand, all of it connected. Everybody who has held this hill has used the inside of it. Medieval Buda stored wine down there, and, according to the guides, hid valuables from the tax collectors. The Ottomans used it militarily during their occupation. In the Second World War, one section became a hospital cut into the rock, with an operating theatre and a ward, and it treated casualties through the siege of Budapest, and again during the uprising of 1956. It also has a Dracula problem. The tourist labyrinth leans hard on the claim that Vlad Tepes was imprisoned in these caves by King Matthias in the 1460s. Vlad was certainly a real man, and he was certainly Matthias's prisoner. Whether he spent any of that time in these particular caves is disputed, and the waxworks should be weighed accordingly. And then there's the part that still doesn't make sense. In July 2011, armed police went into the Labyrinth, cleared out the staff and the tourists, and took the attraction off the private company that had been running it for 27 years. No official explanation was ever published. The caves reopened later in a reduced form, with sections that had been on the tour still closed to this day. If you're enjoying this, hit subscribe, because there's a version of this list for every country on the continent, and we're working through them. And the last 4 get progressively harder to get into, ending with one that's still full of the 1950s. Because there's a difference between a cave system a city built and a cave system a city ran away from. Number 5. The lower levels of Wieliczka, Poland. 10 kilometres southeast of Kraków, miners have been cutting rock salt out of the ground since the 13th century. What they left behind is 9 levels of tunnel, over 2,000 chambers, and something in the region of 245 kilometres of passage, reaching 327 metres below the surface. It went on the very first UNESCO World Heritage List in 1978. You've probably seen photographs of the Chapel of St. Kinga, 54 metres long, carved out of salt by miners in their own time, with salt chandeliers, salt floor tiles, and a salt copy of the Last Supper cut into one wall. It's an extraordinary room and it's on the standard tour, but salt stopped paying. Prices fell, water kept coming in, and commercial extraction at Wieliczka ended in 1996 after roughly 700 years, which leaves the arithmetic. The tourist route takes you through around 20 chambers, between 64 and 135 metres down, on levels 1 to 3. That's about 2% of what's down there. The other 98% is the rest of the mine on the levels below, and it's shut. Up to 9,000 people a day go down that shaft, look at the chapel, lick the wall to check it's really salt, and come back up. Almost none of them register that they turned round about 1/6 of the way to the bottom. Every place so far was dug for one purpose and repurposed once. Number 4 got repurposed by 3 different wars. Number 4. The Odesa Catacombs, Ukraine. Odesa was built out of the ground it stands on. 19th century quarrymen cut Pontian shell limestone from underneath the streets and hauled it up to build the streets, and they did it with almost no oversight, so nobody kept a proper plan. The geologist Konstantin Pronin put the total length at around 2,500 kilometres, which would make it the largest urban labyrinth on Earth. No full survey has ever confirmed it, because no full survey has ever been possible. Quarrying stopped after the revolution of 1917, and smugglers and thieves had the run of the tunnels for 2 decades. Then, Odesa fell to German and Romanian forces in 1941, and Soviet partisan units went down and stayed down, living underground with bunk rooms, a kitchen and a makeshift church, coming up to attack and disappearing again. The occupiers tried sealing the entrances, they tried pumping in gas. There were simply too many ways out. Civilians sheltered down there too, several hundred at a time in some chambers. A museum opened in 1969 at Wieliczka to commemorate the partisans, and the graffiti they left is still legible on the walls. And in 2022, it happened again. Odesa has no metro system to shelter in, so within weeks of the invasion, volunteers were down in the old quarries clearing rubble, wiring in electricity, running internet cable and bolting benches to the walls, turning a 19th century mine back into a bomb shelter. The city has been hit repeatedly since. A ballistic strike on the 15th of March 2024 killed 21 people. So the tunnels are not a tourist curiosity at the moment. They're municipal infrastructure in a city under attack, with 19th century pick marks on the ceiling above the benches. Paris has the same problem for entirely different reasons, and there the tunnels are the danger. Number 3. Les Carrières de Paris, France. Everyone knows about the catacombs. You queue at Denfert Rochereau, walk through the ossuary, look at 6 million people's bones stacked in patterns, and come out. That route is about 1.5 kilometres long. The quarry network it's cut into runs to something like 300 kilometres. The stone is Lutétian limestone, and Paris is built out of it. Notre Dame, the Louvre, the Invalides. The city quarried the ground beneath itself for centuries, then expanded out over the holes it had made, and nobody was keeping the maps. On the 17th of December, 1774, the Rue d'Enfer collapsed. Hell Street, appropriately, near what's now the Boulevard Saint-Michel. Houses, carts, animals and people went down into a void nobody knew was there. More collapses followed, and in 1777 Louis XVI created the Inspection Générale des Carrières and put Charles-Axel Guillaumeau in charge of finding, mapping and propping up the entire undercity before more of Paris fell into it. That organisation still exists and still does the same job. And this is where it stops being an interesting afternoon out. In November 1793, a hospital doorkeeper called Philibert Asper went down a staircase in the courtyard of the Val de Grâce and didn't come back. His body was found on the 30th of April, 1804, 11 years later, a short distance from an exit. Entering the network without an escort has been illegal since the 2nd of November 1955. People go anyway. In June 2017, two teenagers aged 16 and 17 were lost down there for 3 days and were found by search dogs suffering from hypothermia. I'm not going to tell you how anyone gets in, and you should not go looking. This is the one on the list that kills people. Which brings us back to the tunnel with the cars in it, and the city that has more layers than anywhere else on the continent. Before we get to number 1, we have to go under the street it starts from. Number 2, Napoli Sotterranea, Naples, Italy. Piazza San Gaetano is a small square in the old centre with a church on it, and scooters parked at every angle. There's a staircase off it that goes down 40 metres. The Greeks started it. In the 4th and 3rd centuries before Christ, they cut into the soft yellow tuff to quarry building blocks for the walls and temples of their city, Neapolis, and the holes they left became something else. The Romans took the quarry voids and turned them into a water system, feeding the city from springs at Serino, 70 kilometres away, through channels barely wide enough for one man. Branches of the same Augustan aqueduct ran on to Misenum to fill the Piscina Mirabilis, the reservoir that watered the Roman fleet. When that system couldn't supply the 16th century city anymore, a Neapolitan nobleman named Cesare Carmignano paid for a new aqueduct, and that one stayed in service into the 20th century. The cisterns were kept clean by men called Pozzari, who went down the wells to do it. They weren't paid especially well, and the story in Naples is that some of them took the difference by climbing up into the houses of the people whose water they were cleaning. That's where the Municiello comes from, the little monk of Neapolitan legend who gets in somehow and makes things vanish. Then, in 1940 and 41, the bombs came and Naples went down its own wells. Families moved into the cisterns. You can still see the cots and the children's toys they left, 36 metres below the street. To reach the best of it, you go through a passage 50 centimetres wide and 50 metres long, sideways, with a candle, which is how far a Neapolitan will go for cold water. One hill to the west, under Piazza Falcone, a king was digging for entirely different reasons. Number 1. The Bourbon Tunnel, Naples, Italy. On the 19th of February, 1853, Ferdinand II signed a decree commissioning the architect Enrico Alvino to build an underground viaduct from the royal palace to Piazza Vittoria, near the sea and near the barracks. The paperwork called it a public works project. It was nothing of the kind. Naples had come close to overthrowing its king in 1848, And what Ferdinand actually wanted was a road his troops could use to reach him quickly, and a road he could use to reach the sea quietly. Digging began that April, driven from one end only, through the hill by hand. Picks, hammers, wedges and candles. 2 parallel tunnels, one sized for carriages and one for people on foot, running side by side for the first 84 metres. And almost immediately, Alvino's men started hitting things. They broke into a live branch of the 16th century Bolla aqueduct, and rather than cut off the water supply to the houses on Via Capella Vecchia above, they engineered around it. Then they broke into the Carafa caves, tough quarries worked since the 1500s, whose stone had gone into the buildings of that same neighbourhood. The king's escape route was being tunnelled through the leftovers of every previous generation that had dug under Naples. It never opened properly. Ferdinand walked through on the 25th of May, 1855. The public were allowed in for 3 days, and then the work stalled. When Italy unified in 1861, the tunnel was reportedly about 20 metres short of finished. Nobody ever formally shut it. The digging simply stopped, and then the whole thing was forgotten, which is a slower and more permanent kind of closure. Until 1940. During the Allied bombing of Naples, the tunnel became an air raid shelter. And by the reckoning of the association that runs the site today, more than 10,000 people used it. They fitted it with lavatories, which most Neapolitan shelters didn't have. People lived in there for weeks at a time, and they left their beds, their crockery, and their graffiti behind. And then the last act, which is the one nobody expects. From the end of the war until the 1970s, the prosecutor's office used the tunnel as a judicial impound lot. Vehicles confiscated in the city, and vehicles dug out of the bomb rubble, were driven or dragged down into the hill and parked. Cars and motorcycles, 40s through to the 60s. Nobody came for them. A later caretaker made a private income letting locals fly tip down there, and the whole fleet went under a hill of household rubbish. They stayed there, buried, for the rest of the century. Volunteers from the Associazione Culturale Borbonica Sotterranea dug them out by hand and opened the tunnel to the public in 2010. So the cars are down there in the dark, rusted onto their axles, under the middle of a working European capital, in a tunnel a king abandoned, above an aqueduct a Renaissance nobleman paid for, above a quarry the Greeks opened before Rome existed. Naples has spent 2,500 years digging, and it has never once filled a hole back in. That's the thread through all 10. Not one of these places was hidden. Znojmo's cellars, Krakow's market stalls, Edinburgh's close, Wieliczka's lower levels, Odesa's quarries, the tunnel with the cars in it, all of them were ordinary working infrastructure that stopped being useful. And when a city needs the ground back, filling in a void costs more than flooring over it, so the old layer gets a ceiling instead of a demolition order, and everybody moves up one story and forgets. Which is why you can buy a ticket for 8 of the 10 places in this video. Nobody is hiding them. There's a pay desk, a handrail, and a lift. The cars aren't going anywhere. Nothing down there is. Subscribe, and we'll go under another 10. Thank you.